The monsoon season in India is traditionally it's a big affair. Just buckets of rain fall. I mean, first it gets so hot that you break out in a heat rash. And it's hot, and it's especially in North India, it gets really dry. It's just the heat is deadly. People die every year. If you look even at our traditional Panjika, our traditional calendar, you see that many of our saints over the last thousands of years have died during the May, June, because things just get so impossibly hot. People pass away. Then, all of a sudden, just clouds roll in, and the monsoon season starts, and buckets of rain pour. And it's a dangerous time because floods happen, and then there's this incredible humidity also that occurs because of the conjunction of the rain and the heat. But it does go from maybe 110, 115, 120 even, and it just immediately drops down to about 95, like about 20, 25 degrees, just immediately. The temperature becomes tolerable. And the streets flood, and it's almost like if you walk outside during the monsoon season, it's almost like there's somebody standing above you pouring a bucket of water on your head. It's that much rain. It's not dissimilar to standing under a really good shower head, like one of those rain shower heads, but even more so. Sometimes it feels like actual buckets of rain are being poured on you, buckets of water. And as you walk, it's like the person that's standing above you with a limitless bucket of water just pouring it on you wherever you go. And in traditional Hindu culture, when the monsoons start, and really when the Chaturmas starts, there's 4 months, and those 4 months roughly correspond to the start of the monsoon season. And during that time period, where you are is where you stay. You don't leave. So Vaishnavas, traditionally, they will, when the Chaturmas starts, they'll just stay in that place for 4 months solidly. And this creates anxiety for people. When we were traveling on Padayatra, we have bulls and deities and dozens of devotees, and we're walking by foot from village to village in India doing kirtan. And then if we would be somewhere and the rains would start, the monsoon rains would start, the people where we were staying, they would expect that we were going to stay with them permanently. And sometimes we would have fun with that. We'd be like, oh, I guess we will be staying with you for some time. And then it just, in a pious culture, yeah, no problem, it's okay. But you could see they were sweating because we've got a big group of people, and showing up at someone's house for months on end would put them in incredible financial as well as just physical hardship. We're a huge group. But then our program was rain or shine, we would move. So then after some time we would get up and put on our ponchos and start walking in the rain, which is kind of mind-boggling to people. But we had a program, we had stuff to do, and so we just pushed forward because of our service. But traditionally Vaishnavas will stop somewhere, and they'll stop there for 4 months. And they don't do any, I mean, they take bath and worship their deity, but they stay in that place, eat very simply, fast, do extra chanting. And it's like our version of Lent or Ramadan. It's this portion of the year every year, 4 months, that's set aside for spiritual activities. Especially in South. You're from South, right? You?
Yes.
Yeah. You I couldn't tell. But you I could tell. You I could tell. I'm sorry?
Eastern part.
You're from,
Kolkata, near Kolkata, but a city called Jamshedpur.
I mean, that's not South. Where you're from Bengal? You're from South India. You, sir.
I'm from Bangalore.
You're from Bangalore. And you also?
Hyderabad.
You're Hyderabad. Yeah, that's South. I wasn't talking to you. I was looking, and I wasn't even talking to her. I was looking at him. And it's deeper south. You're north, east. You're south. Karnataka is south, but half south. Now you're from Hyderabad. That is pure South India. And so, especially in South India, where the Vaishnava culture is very strong, like Ramanuja is very strong there, Chinagir is very strong there in that part, Telangana, Andhra, Chinagir is very strong there. The Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya is very strong there. Tens of millions of members are there, spread throughout Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. And the tradition among Sri Vaishnavas, 100%, is you don't travel during these 4 months. So of these 4 months, then Kartik is the last of those 4 months. So there's 4 months. It starts in June, July, roughly corresponding to the monsoon season, and it finishes in the month of Kartik, which is the month that just started today. And devotees traditionally perform austerities. Now, we anyways perform austerities throughout the year, all the time. We follow certain rules and regulations all year long, forever. We're vegetarian and sober and celibate or monogamous, and we don't gamble, and we chant japa for a couple of hours a day, and oftentimes you worship the deity every day, also with a vow. We have what we call our nitya karmas, our daily activities that we do for life. And this most people don't ever come up to a standard of personal conduct that they follow every day for their life. You don't really have such a thing in especially not in like European traditions. You get in the Middle East, and you get into Islam a little bit more, but with Christianity, you generally don't have this. Where you take a vow to chant for 2 hours a day for the rest of your life. It's the celibacy thing that people do take that vow. The marriage thing, people take that vow. So that, centered around sexual chastity and regulation, you find that people make these commitments even secularly. You'll get married and you're expected to be faithful forever to your spouse. And then also with celibacy, both in Catholicism or the Orthodox Church, you have this idea of celibacy for life. So there is some sense of, you make a commitment and then you keep it. But the idea of praying every day for 2 hours a day and never taking a day off, you find in Islam you have they pray 5 times a day and face Makkah. So that happens. But when in Christianity, you do Hail Marys and Our Fathers, but it's not like you take a vow that you have to do it no matter what. I don't really find that existing in Christianity. So some rules, marriage or celibacy. And then there's the praying 5 times a day, which is a serious rule in Islam. And so it's not that we're the only tradition that does this kind of stuff, but it's less prevalent or intelligible. You pray 9 days out of 10, what's the big deal if you take 1 day off? For us, it's a big deal. So we encourage people to come up to a really excellent standard of personal conduct and then to stay there at that standard of personal conduct for life. And not to take any breaks. And that's not just it's not just an arbitrary go quick. It's not just an arbitrary thing that we whimsically say, oh, you have to do this for life. There's a logic behind it. Man, is it really complicated here. People have to stop coming and going. It's disturbed my mind. I can't do it. I can't focus on my class. Nihar, you got to either park it or go out. I'm thinking while I'm talking, and if there's too many disturbances, I don't have the mental fortitude. It's a reason to show up on time for class. It makes my life easier. In Christian churches, they just don't let you in. If you show up late to a sermon, they just make you wait outside for 30 minutes, then they bring everybody in, sit everybody down. You got to be absolutely quiet because it's next to impossible to give a lecture when people are running around or do a surgery for that matter or whatever. Somehow, I don't know, it's like a Hindu thing where everybody's like walking around chanting japa and doing stuff and having side conversations. It's like Hindu temples never got this memo, but Buddhist temples, synagogues, and churches, they all got it figured out, but Hindus are just anti any kind of, you know? Okay. I remember where I am. I'm trying to remember what I want to say next. Doing something every day for our whole life. And that is that if something is really important to you, then there would never be a reason to take a day off from it. Nobody takes a day off from being married and staying faithful to their spouse. If someone's sober, they don't take a day off from their sobriety. They make it a principle to live up to a certain standard of conduct, and there's never any reason to drop from that standard of conduct, to sully oneself. We usually can understand that in terms of indulging in a negative behavior. But it's a little more difficult for us to wrap our heads around the idea that I'm going to do something positive every day to uplift myself. And it's just as important to me as avoiding negative behaviors is observing positive behaviors. And therefore, I will chant japa every day for 2 hours for the rest of my life. Because it's just that important to me. And it's not just that I avoid negative things that will sully me, but I engage in positive things that uplift me. And it also becomes a way of showing Krishna. Are they dribbling the basketball? They are. Like, be heavy, okay? Puff your chest out. And so we have these things that we do every day, and they're reasoned. They are logical. They stem from our commitment to spirituality, and they involve both avoidance of things that will drag you down and engagement in things that raise your consciousness up. Usually when you look at rules and regulations in Western traditions, and this would include both Christianity and Islam, and even Judaism for that matter, really, the bulk of the world's population. Go again. Tell an adult. Otherwise they can all just come in here and be in part of class. Usually when you look at rules and regulations, they're linked to some idea of punishment. That if you do something wrong, then you will receive punishment. If you look at the way rules and regulations are laid out in the Hebrew Torah or the New Testament, but especially the Hebrew Torah, or within Islam and the Quran and the Hadith, you'll find that when you don't do things properly and when you do the wrong thing and when you commit a crime, then there is a punishment attached. These books were written at a time prior to there being a separation of church and state. And so Jewish texts are really law books, similar to what the Manu Samhita would be in Hinduism. And the Quran is really Sharia. It's a system of government. It's a legal code. If you do this, then you get stoned. If you do this, then you're buried alive. If you do this, then you're killed. So these texts were written at a time prior to there being a separation of church and state, and as such, what you were really looking at is a legal code with punishments. And so people follow, and there was this idea that God was there and he would punish you if you didn't behave properly. And so much of what we encounter in terms of motivation, traditional motivation to avoid, let's say, adultery or to avoid intoxication is a threat of punishment, either from above, from God, or from people who will burn you at the stake or stone you to death. Interesting that there's a doctor named Richard Curtis. He was attached to Harvard University and Johns Hopkins University. He passed away in the late 80s. He did an experiment in 1957, and it was based on some earlier work which had been done in the 40s, in 1942, about voodoo deaths. And there are accounts, medical accounts, that were, watched by doctors, not in a clinical setting, but they observed these things happen, where a witch doctor would curse somebody and they would die within a day. There was research done in Australia amongst Aboriginals in Australia, and there was research done in South America and Haiti, and in the rainforest in Brazil. And they found there were these circumstances where people were cursed and they died within a few hours or a day or two. Anyway, this led to him doing some experiments with rats. He put the rats in water. The rats would tread water for a couple of minutes. He did it with both domesticated rats as well as wild rats, which were much more ferocious and were much better swimmers, and then with hybrid rats, which were a combination of both. And he would put the rats in water, and then they would swim around frantically. And if they cut the whiskers, it would really create problems for the rats, because rats feel with their whiskers, and it's their primary way. They have very poor eyesight. The primary way they interact with the world is through their whiskers. And so they would trim their whiskers down, and they would freak out and dive to the bottom of the water and swim around trying to get out, feel their way out of the glass, and just drown. And sometimes it was within a minute, 2 minutes. And then sometimes the rats would survive for up to 85 hours. And they had jets of water going in, so they couldn't just float. They had to tread water and swim actively because they were agitating the water. And they were trying to figure out what caused some of the rats to survive and not. And so they began to mess with them and do different things. And so the trimming of the whiskers was one thing they did. But something else they did, and weirdly the wild rats, which had been caught, were so broken from being caught that they, although they were way better swimmers and way more ferocious naturally, they would die most quickly. And the domesticated rats, who maybe were more used to being controlled, they would survive for longer. But he couldn't really figure out what was going on. He thought maybe they were getting so excited due to shock that they were, but it turns out it wasn't their sympathetic nervous system, it was their parasympathetic nervous system, and their heart just kind of slowed down. But not the way it would happen if in a state of shock, where your heart rate goes up, and after a period of time you can't sustain that level, and it gradually goes down. It would just start to dip out. And they had noticed the same thing happening with these people who had been cursed, where their heart rate started to slow, almost psychosomatically. Anyway, what they did was he picked up the rats out of the water eventually, right as they were drowning, right as they were dipping below the surface. He would pick them up and hold them for a minute and then drop them back in the water. And that act of picking them up for a minute or two was not enough time for them to recover physically, and then dropping them back in the water, that enabled all of the rats to consistently survive for 60, 70, 80 hours. And it removed the distinction between the wild rats, the hybrid rats, and the domesticated rats. And it solved the problem of whether their whiskers had been cut or anything else had been done to them. Somehow the act of hope and the creation of hope was enough to encourage rats or human beings to survive. Sometimes if the witch doctor would remove the curse, or there would be some fortuitous event, then the people would come back to life, like for their hearts slowing down and they're just about to go away, and then something would happen and they'd come back to life. And this was a very significant set of experiments that Dr. Curtis did to demonstrate the power of hope in helping people to overcome exhaustion and push themselves beyond what they would consider to be their normal limits. In general, when you think about rules and regulations, there's this Victorian sense that if you don't follow these rules, you'll be punished. And religion has been using that as an inspiration. Much the same way that in a legal system, you have threats of punishment. It's not a guideline that you have to follow the speed limit or obey traffic lights. If it was a guideline, no one would follow it. If it was a recommended best practice, no one would follow it. But rather, there is a group of armed men, really a gang, a well-armed gang, that drive around and will force you off the road and punish you financially, and if you don't listen to them, they'll take away your freedom. It's the police. And that threat of punishment is what encourages people to follow the rules. It's a strong motivator, but it's a limited motivator. That threat of punishment is, it doesn't turn people's hearts. And you'll find people trying to squeeze through the cracks, and when no one's looking, then they behave poorly. And People may behave properly for the purpose of their reputation, to how they're seen by others. But there's a difference when your good behavior is the result of character. And it's just who you are. And then even when no one's looking, you do the right thing. Because it's your character. It's your nature. We are interested in developing character. We also really believe that God exists. And so he's a big part of our life. I usually give arguments for the existence of God, but it'll get in the way of what I want to talk about today. So I'm just going to assume that you all know there's good reasons to believe in God. And now it becomes a question of what conception of God you believe in, and what attributes you ascribe to God, and what kind of relationship you want to have with God. And a fear-based relationship, a punishment-based relationship, that kind of negative power differential, hegemonic relationship where you're afraid of misbehaving because you'll be punished, it has really serious limitations. It's great right off the bat as a boilerplate starting point, but it has some really serious limitations. Hope and love, those things have an almost limitless capacity for motivating and inspiring someone to stretch far beyond what others can do. And so, thank you. You're good. Run out there and tell them to be quiet again. They're kids, so you guys have no excuse. You guys showing up late every week. No excuse. They're kids. We can remind them every 5 minutes. Of course, the adults out there who don't remind them, they're the problem. So we have stuff we do every day. And you should understand, we chant japa every day because we love Krishna. And we miss him. And we want to show him we love him. And we want to commune with him and connect with him. And it's a love letter that we write every day. And we spend time. And it's an outpouring of the condition of our heart, that our heart is filled with love. And as such, we remain motivated. And if you are not motivated and you falter, then that is a symptom that you are in a diseased condition. And that's okay. We know how to deal with that also. And part of the way you deal with that lack of enthusiasm that sometimes plagues people, is every year we have special events. So we have these daily things we do, and our daily program is severe. We have a serious program. You know, sometimes devotees will eat too many sweets or something like that, and you might be down like, oh, why are you so uncontrolled that you're eating sweets? And they're like, hey, I'm celibate, I'm sober, I chant hours of japa every day. Like, if I want to eat a couple extra sweets, like, I gave up a lot, you know. It's like, it's like there's not a lot of stuff. It's like it's a pious coping mechanism. One of the ways we stay inspired is it's not just that we have things we do every day, but we also have things we do every year. And there's an interesting corollary with the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church, and probably most of you don't know this, the Catholic Church goes through the entire birth, life, death, and resurrection of Jesus liturgically every day on their altar. In the morning time is the birth, and then in the masses that go on throughout the day, they go through the life and times and death and resurrection and ascension of Jesus to heaven every day. from morning to night. Then every year they go through that whole thing as well. So they have a double schedule. They have a daily schedule of Jesus' life, and then they have a yearly schedule of Jesus' life. Wild, right? We have the same kind of thing. We don't have the weird idea that God died and that you're going to eat his body and blood, which is like some kind of symbolic cannibalism that I don't think stands up real well to dispassionate scrutiny. I think it's legitimately weird. And, yeah, there you go. And I can say that because I was raised a Christian. So I am allowed to hate on Christianity to my heart's content. And I know more about than all of you put together. And so there it is. We have the same thing going on. Every day we touch Everest in our japa. We cry out to Krishna. And we feel Krishna's presence in our life. And we have miraculous experiences daily. Your heart every day you should be moved to tears of joy and gratitude daily in your japa. We live a different life. We live a life where we, touch the angels every day. Touch the infinite every day. And in every year, we have extra things we do that keep us focused and motivated. And there's festivals, and then there's this 4-month-long festival. And that's Chaturmas. And it roughly corresponds to the actual seasonal change in India with the onset of the monsoon season. And takes you through the harvest period. And now we're in the last month of Chaturmas, which roughly is like equivalent to the Mid-Autumn Festival in traditional Chinese culture, the harvest moon in Western culture, Thanksgiving in the U.S. and around the world. This transition from where the summer crops have been harvested and you are preparing for winter. And so during the month of Kartik, so you get the monsoon season through to the harvest season. And that's an actual thing that's going on. And then many of our sacred days just happen to occur during this time period. And so you could also look at this month as being a constellation of different sacred days which all occurred. And there were enough of them where we said, hey, let's make the whole month special because there's just so many special events that take place. Like they do a spring break or a winter break. It's a big enough, and there's enough of them, and New Year's, and Christmas, and Thanksgiving. You make a whole little season out of that. It's the holiday season. It's the fourth quarter. And then most people, they celebrate that by doing retail therapy and by just a wanton display of materialism, buying useless gifts that have nothing whatsoever to do with the tradition that they're a part of. We're trying not to do that. We have a little bit of that. We have Diwali, which is a crazy, dangerous fireworks festival. If you're in India, you see there's always some guys missing half a finger, and you're like, oh, what happened? He's out on Diwali. Because you can buy sticks of dynamite in India, just like a 5-year-old can buy a stick of dynamite in India on the street, and so the Diwali celebration's gone awry. Just you cover people with scars, isn't it? So it's not that we don't have that materialism there. I don't know that, Ram's return to Ayodhya is best celebrated with a dangerous fireworks display which maims children. I don't know if that's, or keeps people up all night and creates a ton of pollution. I don't know that that's the way to show Ram you really love him or something. If I read Ramayana or just do some japa or do a kirtan or something like that, I think there's way better ways of celebrating it. And so at the heart of this celebration that lasts for a month, that's part of a 4-month celebration, that includes giving certain things up. We don't eat spinach or urd dal or yogurt or milk. There's certain things we avoid eating during these months in addition to our regular diet, very similar to Lent or Ramadan. And then usually devotees will chant some extra japa, or they'll offer a lamp every day to the deity. We do that. Usually everybody does that. And then there's a song we sing. And the song is the Damodarastakam. And so we'll go through that song over the next few weeks. But we'll go over the first couple of lines of the song today. The song starts out, Namami Ishwaram Satchit Ananda Rupam. Namami, I offer my respects. Namami is in the first person singular present tense. It means I'm offering my namaskar. Namami. Namami Ishwaram. I'm offering my respects to Ishwar. Ishwar is the standard Sanskrit word for Lord. God comes from the Sanskrit root ish, which means to rule. And so Namami Ishwaram. Satchit Ananda Rupam. To that Lord who has a form made out of eternality, bliss, and knowledge. So it's clear that you're dealing with a Vaishnava tradition. It's not positing that I'm not offering my basis to the formless. I'm offering my basis to a spiritual form, not an anthropomorphic form like we have, not a material form, but I'm offering my basis to the source of all reality that has a transcendent form. Welcome, Ajay Prabhu. Who's that? There's a jacket on that chair. Pull the jacket off the chair. We have your chariot awaits, Prabhu. Please sit. And turn your phone off. That's you, man. Twice. Come on. It's twice. Turn it off. Namami Ishwaram Satchit Ananda Rupam. I offer my obeisance to the Lord who has a form of eternality, bliss, and knowledge. Lasat Kundala. And the Lord has shining earrings. Shining earrings. Gokule Brajamana. And he is also shining in Gokula, or frolicking in Gokula. I'm offering my obeisances to the Supreme Lord, who has a form of eternality, bliss, and knowledge, but now that form is being described. And it's being described in what could only be described as in a very, almost you could say seductive, intriguing, beguiling, beautiful way. Almost like you would see Cupid being described in Greek literature. Just this impossible, beautiful personality. And so Krishna's wearing these beautiful earrings. And where is he? He's in Gokula. He's in a place filled with cows. Which sounds weird. It doesn't make sense. You're offering obeisance to Ishwar. You should be on a throne in heaven, surrounded by lightning bolts. But instead, he's just this wickedly beautiful child that's just stealing your mind. Lasat kundalam gokule brajamanam. And then it gets weirder. Yashoda Biya. He is afraid of Yashoda, from fear of Yashoda, his mother. That's also strange. How could God have a mother? Yashoda Biya Ulukalat Davamanam. He's running from the Ulukala, from the grinding mortar, out of fear of his mother. There's a bunch of strange things here. Number one, how could God wear earrings? That would mean God has ears. It's starting to sound a little too anthropomorphic. Then he's got a mother. Now it's just downright vexing. And then he's afraid of his mother, which is impossible. It becomes progressively less tenable and less intelligible. And then it gets worse. Paramrishtam atyanta jutya gopya. And he's caught from behind by that gopi who's quicker. So now, you not only have all these strange elements of a deity with ears and earrings, who's somehow the source of all reality and is transcendental. But he's in a cowherd village. He's got a mother. He's afraid of his mother, so much so that he's running away from her out of fear. And his mother is faster than he is. But how could that be? That Krishna, who runs faster than the speed of the mind, how could Krishna be caught by someone else? It doesn't make any sense. And then it gets weirder. Still. Rudantang. He's crying. Rudantang muhu. He's crying a lot. Netra yugman mrejantam. And he's rubbing his eyes. So the same thing, he's got eyes, that's something you got to deal with. But he's also crying and rubbing his eyes like a child. How could God, who's bliss personified, he's Ananda Rupa, who was just defined as having a form made out of Ananda, made out of pure bliss. And it's the form is eternal, and it's chit, it's conscious. So the Lord is omniscient, but yet he's afraid. How could he be afraid if he's all-knowing? He's bliss personified, but yet he's crying. He's got an eternal form, but yet he has a mother. None of it makes any sense. Rudantang muhu netra yugman mrejantam kada amboja yugmena. And he's rubbing his two eyes with his two lotus hands. Two hands, two eyes. So we've now also been told that this is a two-armed deity. Not even a four-armed. At least four-armed Vishnu seems alien enough where it could be God, right? But this is two arms, so he's like a child crying, running from his mother. It's starting to sound like a child. But Krishna's supposed to be Purana. He's supposed to be the oldest. Shatanka Netram. His eyes are fearful. Again, he's like afraid. That theme is coming up again. Shatanka Netram. Muhu Shvasa. He's breathing heavily. Muhu Shvasa. Kampa Chireka Anka Kanta. And he's breathing heavily, and he's shaking from breathing heavily. Stita Grivam, and the necklace that he's wearing on his neck is shaking as he shakes from breathing heavily. So he's crying. He's making such a scene of huffing and puffing and crying. He's so afraid. He's trembling so much that the necklace on his neck is shaking uncontrollably. Damodaram Bhakti Badham. That Damodar is a compound term in Sanskrit. It's a Bahuvrihi Samas, it's a particular type of compound, that the person who is bound around their abdomen. Udara. Udara is where you get the word udder from. And so their midsection. Probably abdomen also comes from that Sanskrit root, would be my guess. And so he's bound. His mother ties a rope around him to keep him from running away. Sometimes you see this like with dogs or with misbehaved children. They'll be on a leash. So Yashoda did that. She put Krishna on a leash. That's also just mind-blowing. And then we call Krishna Damodar. It's a term we have for God. Like Christos means the anointed one, or Allah means the great one. So our name for God is the one who's bound around his belly. It sounds as untenable as the weird Christian thing of God dying. but it was not as macabre. It's this like heavy anthropomorphic deity that has to be, you have to address it. And then the next verse does just that. Iti drik swa lila bhi ananda kunde swa goshang nima jantam akya payantam. To let it be declared. Akya payantam. So it will be declared. What is Krishna declaring? I'll tell you that in a minute. Iti drik. Idrik swa lila bhi. By such pastimes. Swa goshang. His own people. His own devotees. His own angels. Ananda kunde nima jantam. He is immersing them in pools of ecstasy by performing these pastimes. And akya payantam, he's declaring it, he's letting it be declared, tadiya ishita gyeshu, to those people who know your glories, of prayer to Krishna. To those people who know your glories, you are declaring bhaktai jitatva, that your nature is that you are conquered by love. And that is the resolution to every confusing thing we just outlined. We believe that a true deity would ultimately be supremely lovable and not just supremely fearable. And an all-good God would want you to love him. And an all-powerful God could create a universe in which such love was possible. Therefore, if you believe in an all-powerful and all-good God, you must believe that pure love of God is possible, because an all-good God would want such love to be possible, and an all-powerful God could create a universe in which such love was in fact possible. And that love must stand above a fear-based relationship. And that love has to be intimate. Could you, just as a favor with me, just go like bark at them. Maybe turn the hose on them. And then what kind of love? There's different kinds of love. An all-good deity would want to love you intimately. Intimate love trumps formal love. Formal love, your love of your queen or your love of your king, has limitations because there's a power differential between you and the person you love. They're very powerful. No one goes up and just, except for maybe Obama's mother maybe goes up and gives him a hug, but other people, the Queen of England, you have to take a whole course in how to bow and curtsy in front of the Queen of England, how far you have to bow and curtsy and not to approach and not to walk too close. Or a judge, when they walk in the courtroom, everybody has to rise when the judge walks in. But that kind of love is limited because there's such a power differential. And so an all-loving deity, all good means all-loving, an all-loving deity would want that intimate love to be able to exist between you and him. But how could that happen? It can't happen because he's God. He's the origin of the universe, and you're just a small atomic soul. How does that love occur? Everyone falls in love so much that they forget who's the boss, who's the worker, and they just love each other like family. And what's being described here is a situation in which Krishna's devotees, his angels, are able to forget his divinity and love him to their heart's content and love him like their own child. And a deity that was not capable of that level of intimate love would not be all good. And a deity that couldn't make that love possible in this world wouldn't be all powerful. And so what you're seeing here is a tradition which places a premium on pure, intimate love. And you have a pundit here who is aware of what's going on and is breathtaken by seeing these pastimes that Krishna performs that draw his devotees in and allow them to love him in miraculous ways that even Brahma and Shiva can't understand. And he says, Bhaktai jitatvam, puna prematastam, shatabriti bande. We're good. Hey, thank you. You did it once. I felt bad already. Don't do it again. Puna prematastam, shatabriti bande. I'm offering my prayers to you who are performing these pastimes hundreds of times with love in my heart. I'm seeing this and I'm feeling love in my heart, and I'm offering my obeisances to you who are so wonderful that you are making such love possible. Where people forget that you're God and love you like their child. Even though the whole universe is your child, they love you like you're their child. They bind you with a rope like you're under their control. You're conquered by the love because, and here's the last one. If you believe in an all-powerful, all-good God, then that all-powerful, all-good God would have to be conquerable by love. Because the very nature of love is it only exists in a vulnerable space. Intimate love means you're affected by the people who love you. It means you're vulnerable. It means you're open. It means you're empathetic. It means you feel for other people. It means you are relativized. Relative isn't always a bad word. There is no compassion or grace or mercy without empathy. There is no empathy without allowing someone else to affect you. There is no allowing someone else to affect you without becoming relativized and vulnerable to them. There are positive ways in which you can be relative, as well as absolute. And the Supreme Being would be both completely absolute and completely relative in all the best ways. And so if you believe in an all-good, all-powerful deity, then you also believe that intimate love is possible. And that intimate love requires vulnerability. And therefore Krishna is declaring it. Akyapayantam. Let it be declared what? That I'm conquered by love. And a deity who is not conquered by love would not be an all-good, all-powerful deity. And so what you've got here is a spiritual tradition which has deeply considered over thousands of years what it means to believe in an all-good, all-powerful deity. What the most beautiful conception of divinity you could possibly come up with would be. What the most beautiful and bewitching and beguiling version and conception of divinity would be. What that deity would be doing. How you could relate to that deity. How you would fall in love with that deity. And that's what we celebrate this month. We follow all the rules and all the regulations. We pray, we increase the prayers. We're doing what all the other traditions do. But we're not doing it out of fear. At least we shouldn't be. We're not even just doing it out of duty. We're doing it because we have love in our hearts. Because we really love Krishna. We're in love with Krishna. We use romantic language to talk about how we feel about God because it's the only language which really communicates the depth and the profundity and the intensity of the love that we feel. And with that kind of love, we live in this world like those rats who've been picked up. They've experienced the miracle, and they know that miracle is going to come again, and they can tread water forever. And therefore we follow every day. We follow every year. We follow every lifetime. We don't even care if we go back to heaven in one lifetime. Let us come back again. What's it going to change? I'm never going to stop worshiping Krishna. I'm never going to stop trying to embrace the divine. That's the purpose of my life. It's why I'm here. It's why I exist. Everything else I do is secondary. Everything else I do is a sideline. My real life is this. And what reason is there to be afraid? There's no more reason for fear. Now Krishna becomes afraid to augment your love, to excite and accentuate and extend your love. He becomes afraid. You run after him in love, and you capture him, and you bind him into your heart with love. And that's what we celebrate. this month. And so we're going to sing this song, which is super ancient and is sung by tens of millions of pious Hindus every year during the month of Kartik. And we're going to offer lamps. And we're going to celebrate this. And that's what we're doing. Thank you very much. And let's do a little kirtan now. Hare Krishna.